sin should make us grow. We look forward to redemption because we know that things are not as they should be. We know that we are not as we should be. We know that the world we live in is not as it should be. As Joanne has been talking about on Wednesday nights and in her preaching and in the reading plan, we must be bothered by our sin. We have to come to a point where we are tired of ourselves, where we're tired of our selfishness, of our self-centeredness, of our fleshly, sinful behavior. See, this is what Scripture's saying to us. It's not that we're groaning over their sin. It's not that I'm groaning over your sin, but that we're groaning over all sin, and we're starting with my sin. There should be something in us that's groaning because we are aware of who God is because God lives in us. And once you become aware of who God is, there's this reality that we realize hatred was not God's plan, and confusion was not God's will, deception is not God's idea, greed is not God's heart, violence is not God's character, selfishness is not in God's being, and there was no presence of fear in those first 7 days of creation. All of these things should bother us because they make the Spirit groan, but they should make us groan. Not to be offended, but to recognize this is not how it should be. This is not how God intended it. This is not what God desires. And then there should be some place where there's a room for mercy in our groaning. And here's what I mean. Where we start to acknowledge and recognize that those who are lost are deceived. And yet here's the struggle that I have with us as the church. We have a tendency to be more angry with the deceived than the deceiver. We have a tendency to take it out on those who have been deceived rather than the spirit, the enemy who is doing the deceiving. We get caught up in all the same stuff. We get caught up in all the same mindsets and ideas and thought processes. We watch the same shows. We listen to the same conversations. We act the same way. And yet we get mad at people for not knowing what they've been deceived into not knowing. There should be a place where we groan, where there's mercy, that rather than being angry over where they are, there should be a place where we are so overwhelmed because this is not what God desires for you. Guys, if we're not bothered by our own sin, we're never going to be bothered by the sin that's around us, other than to be offended by it. I mean bothered in a way that changes things. Because if we're not bothered by our sin, we're never going to submit to being changed. See, the groaning is a longing for God to be glorified. The groaning that we're supposed to have in us is a longing for God's will to be accomplished, for His plan to be fulfilled, for God to have the untarnished, unblemished, unstained, unwrinkled creation that He longs for and that He deserves.